for the new users on the call and that doesn't know yet about what visual programming is in cmBuilder, it's basically the tool and the engine that we use to control our animations, right? So it's an interface that you use to do animations for resources. It is limited to point resources for now, but we plan to have this used for other type of resources in cmBuilder, like linear resources or guided ones, but also it's going to control the animations that you're going to see on the back end for imported models as well. Okay, so this is something that's coming. Just a quick reminder is that the visual programming is kind of like an advanced power user feature. We consider it as an advanced feature because it goes deep in like in several like kind of like logic and different interfaces and like something that is a little bit more complex, but don't worry about that. It's just that like this is just to let you know that the support from the team might be limited about the things that we can do and we help you guys, but we do have recommend that you go through the documentation that is available on the site, and also like we're going to cover a lot of the details of the animation process in here. Okay, so starting with the tool layout, right? So how can you start with our tool, right? So like where you can find it inside the platform. So you can use it with a new resource, or you can use it for an existing resource, or you can import a template directly to add an existing animation directly to the platform, right? So I'm going to show a little bit how to do that with both, right? So over here, we can see that there is an existing resource in this scenario, and then when I go into my visual programming, I can import a new template, or I can create a new visual programming, or I can edit the one that is already created over here, or I can export this, right? So the export function is also very important. We're gonna talk about this later, but keep in mind that the visual graph template that you use and then you create in cmBuilder creates a file that's called a JSON file, which is basically a coding file that you can import and export, or you can download and create your own libraries. And we're going to talk about this later, right? So an existing resource that already has a visual graph, you're going to see this interface over here. But if you add a new resource to the site, like for example, an excavator, and I want to create a new animation for this excavator, I'm going to click on visual programming, and I'm going to see that I can create a new one. I can upload a file over here as well. And I can also, if this resource already has a template embedded into it from our library, you will see the list of the embedded templates over here, right? So this is something that we plan also to work on our database to have templates added to almost all resources, but this is something that we're going to do like later in the future. And another way of adding this is to importing a template directly. So when you open the library over here, so a lot of people miss this button, but you can click over here to import a template directly, and this will bring in that JSON file. But keep in mind that this template will already have a predefined resource attached to it, right? So let's say that you import a template for a move on path, for example. Let's do that right now. So if I import a template for this, and I go over here, my downloads, I can get like, for example, a move online template. And when I open this, you see that I'm now adding a dump truck to the site, because that template originally was created for a dump truck, but it doesn't mean that you cannot change it to another resource. You cannot apply it to another resource. Okay, so if I add this object over here, now it's going to come in with a template for my visual programming. Okay, so that being said, we can go to the next one, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the node interface, right? So what it is to work on the visual programming. So let's understand what is the visual template that we have, right? So for example, for a resource like this one, for me to start working with the presentation, I will go ahead and create a new visual programming, right? So when I open the visual programming, this is the interface that I get, and I can see over here just one single node that represents what is the object that we are working on, right? So this blocks my whole view, but I can click on this button over here in the bottom to minimize it, and then I can see now the resource and the template at the same time. And I can also maximize this to see the controls for this animation. But also the most important thing is that you can change your view to go into the parameters over here, because this will help you define, like, see what are the parameters that are available for this object, and also see the limits in which you can adjust it, right? So for you to start adding nodes over here to this interface, and when I mean nodes are these, all of these little squares that we're going to start connecting them. To start like something new, you can double click over here to search for a node. So I can put over here, for example, animate, and then I'm going to see the animate bone node, right? Or I can right click and click on add node, and I'm going to see a list over here of menus with like several different categories of nodes that are embedded into this library. You don't need to know all of them. You just need to know which ones are the most important for you to use if you're going to build animations from scratch, right? So we're going to go through a couple of these nodes today, the main ones. Okay. So we have the adding nodes, we have the animation preview, the adjust function, and so on and so forth. Okay. So let's understand a little bit about the node basics. So I'm going to close this presentation over here because I want to keep like something on the other side, right? So for me to create a node, I just added one over here. And to understand how the nodes works are like, everything that is on the left side over here is an input, and everything that is on the right side is an output, right? So there are several different types of nodes that we can work in cmBuilder, and I will explain them. But for now, I'm just going to start showing like how we connect these, right? So for example, for this animate bone node, for it to be useful, I have to put some inputs in it, right? So it doesn't know which bones are supposed to read from. And then if you connect the bones and to this, you now have a list of all the bones that are available inside this same resource. So in cmBuilder, bones and parameters are the same thing. They have the same. It's just the same term for the same thing. Okay. So basically, for you to start creating a connection between these nodes, you just drag and drop these lines, right? So you can also, for example, right click on this object to clone it. And then I have now a second animate bone over here, right? So this node has all the list of bones that I have available for this resource, but this one doesn't. And the reason why is because there is no input over here for these nodes. So I can click and drag this, and now I have a list of nodes that I can use. Okay, so that's basically the idea, right? So you're connecting these nodes to have like, either you're gonna have trigger events, which are these squares, right? So these are basically like triggers to activate or deactivate specific nodes, and you're gonna have the data inputs and outputs, right? So the little circle are data inputs and data outputs. Okay. So yeah, so for you to delete a connection, you can click on this little circle over here, and then you can delete the node, right? And this is gonna go away. Okay. One thing about this tool is that there are some things that we are still adjusting on the tool itself, on the interface for the visual programming. So for example, you're gonna miss that, like for example, there's no Control Z for this, and so on and so forth. But these are things that we are slowly adding to the platform. Okay. So if you want to see more information about this node specifically, you can double click on it, and this will open properties over here. Sometimes you're going to see the same information in both the both menus, but for some nodes, for example, for the delay node, I want to create a delay in between the trigger of this object over here. When this node is done, it's gonna, when this is finished, it would trigger the next one, right? But let's say that I want to create a delay in between those two. I want it, like the software, to understand that there is a pause in between those two. So I can create, for example, a delay node over here where I can trigger this and then do this, right? But I don't know how long is going to be this delay. So if I double click on this object, I'm going to see over here a definition of the time that this delay has, right? So this just to exemplify that you can double click on these objects, you see more information about it. Okay, so yeah, that's like these are the basics of you creating these nodes and connecting them and like cloning and so on and so forth. Like for example, if I hold control, I can select a bunch of nodes and I can right click and then clone them. And then I have like the nodes again. However, we need to reconnect the triggers, right? So this is something that we are also gonna kind of like work to make it easier for you to connect these things. And you can also hold control and do a control C and then apply this to other objects. So for example, if I open this other object over here and I create a new programming for it, and then I do a control V. Oh, my keyboard is messed up, sorry. But like if you do a control V, you can copy paste like a group of nodes from one presentation, from one object to the other. Okay, so again, if you do that copy paste, you're gonna need to reconnect the nodes so like they will work properly. Cool. So let's see some examples of nodes that we have over here. So like if I swap this, examples of nodes that we have, right? So we have parameter animation, which is the one that I showed right now, which is an animate bone. But we also have like basic inputs. So like if you want to assign a number to a specific kind of like node or something like that. For example, if I want to have like an operation node for over here, I can assign this number and connect it to the A and then connect another number to B, and then the result is going to be apply to something else, right? So there are like other things, there are like these basic inputs that you can create to like work with operations and so on and so forth, right? You also have like the trigger nodes that you can use to trigger like something to start. For example, the click me button, you can connect this to a looping sequence. You can have a scenario start event. You can have a milestone change event or a delay node and the looping one as well, right? So if I use a couple of these over here, you see that I can have, for example, the parameter animation that we created over here right now for this object. I can define that I want the node for the base rotation of this resource to rotate from 0 to 180 degrees, and then I wanted to go and do 180 degrees back to 0. So I like assigning over here the value A, and the value B is the first value and then the second value of this bone, and then I'll define a duration in which how long it's going to take for this object to complete that translation of those two values. Okay, so right now nothing is moving because there is no trigger, right? So if I want, for example, to put in the button for a trigger, I can double click over here and I can type in button, and then there's going to show up like the UI for the button. And then I can connect this object over here, and I have a trigger now to start the animation. And then you can see the different the path of that animation by checking the highlighted kind of like lines that you can see what is being executed at the time. And if I, for example, increase the delay over here, I can have now a delay of 5 seconds to between these two animations. So you go in, goes to 180, then waits 5 seconds in here, and then go back and then bring the object back, right? So these are the type of kind of like things that you can have to create these triggers. Okay, search nodes. Okay, cool. So just search nodes, you can double click and then you're gonna see the search function. This will have like all the nodes in here, but you can also type in something that you want. Like if you type in bone, you're gonna have like everything that has the bone name in it. And then when you click it, it will add that node for you. So sometimes you want to rename these nodes as well to understand how like what is being applied to them. So you can right click and then click on title over here, and then you can say that this is rotation 1, for example, and then you can right click and do title and do this one's going to be rotation 2. And if you click on this little sphere over here, it collapses the nodes. So you have like a little bit cleaner kind of like situation going on over here, right? But of course, this requires some coordination for you to understand with the titles what's going on in each one of these nodes. Okay, so that being said, we can create these animations. I just created one over here. So let's say that I want to create this rotation, this kind of like simulation over here going on a loop. I would also add a sequencer. So a sequencer is quite an important one because it tells you like that you can connect a bunch of elements to the start point of the sequence, and then you can connect a bunch of elements to the end point of this sequence. So it means that whenever this is finished, it goes over here into the sequence and then goes back and then triggers this rotation number one. However, I need something to start the sequence. So there are a couple of triggers that we can do to start the sequence, right? So one of the triggers is this button over here, what I mentioned, which is basically I use buttons like that. I usually place them into the simulations because this helps me debug it, right? I can apply it, can click to activate the simulation or the animation and start playing right away. Then I can see over here in my view if this is what I want, right? Once I figure out that this is what I want, I can add another trigger over here that's going to be the scenario start, right? I'm going to add this trigger right now, but I'm not going to connect it. So you see that the simulation is playing right now, but if I hit done over here and then I refresh it, because there's no trigger to start that simulation right away, it will start my scenario will start with that simulation not playing, with the animation not playing, right? So you see that object's not moving, but if I go over here and edit, and then I connect this scenario event to start the whole thing. Now, if I refresh my session, it will start playing right away because I connected that scenario start event. So my trigger for that animation is that whenever the scenario starts, that animation starts right away, as you can see over here. One thing to understand is that it doesn't matter if this object is visible or not in this milestone, the animation will still be playing. So like, for example, if I connect this object over here to begin from the second milestone and I go back, that object's not there, right? However, if I highlight it over here on my heavy machinery, I can see that that object is playing, right? So the animation is playing. Why am I saying that? Is because if you connect a scenario start trigger to an animation and then you have that object showing up on milestone 5, keep in mind that your animation will start the moment that you open the scenario. Okay, so if you need that animation to really start on the milestone 5, there is a way for us to do that. But if you connect it to the scenario start, regardless if the object is there or not on that milestone, the animation will still be playing. Okay, so I will explain more about that how to create like an animation to start on a specific milestone in a minute. Cool. I'm just showing like some basic examples of nodes and how like you can use them for your animations.